Baylor's most overrated opponent on the football schedule 2024 is a team we're going to tell you about on this Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Locked On Baylor, and thank you for making it your first listen today and every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. We appreciate you having in for another week here in the summer. We are going to go over a little bit of the Baylor football schedule. There was a question sent in by a viewer. We're going to go through some mailbag questions, including who is that most overrated opponent, how Baylor basketball can win without being kind of a finished product. I'll explain what I mean, but we will start with the first commit in the 2026 class for Baylor football. We are looking at Davis Penn, the running back from Southlake Carroll, who is coming off a big year where he rushed for almost 1,600 yards and got in the end zone 30 more times. That is the first for the 2026 class. This is still a big couple of weeks for 2025, and we'll have all of that covered here on Locked On Baylor, on Twitter at Locked On Baylor as well. The great Will Turboff has been on top of this for us from Bears Illustrated and 247. In fact, by the time we've got another episode this week, I'll bet we'll have some other 2025 commits as well coming off an official visit weekend. But Davis Penn is the first name penned. Get it? Penned in for the 2026 class. This is absolutely a Khenon Hall victory. That we talk about the Khenon Hall Effect, TM, and what it does really all across the offense. We've seen that effect, especially. I know he's the lead recruiter for both sides of the ball, but we've seen a lot of it on the offensive side. He comes in as the running backs coach, was doing the same thing over at SMU. And this is the first one that we see that is a definite Khenon Hall victory for 2026, as Penn is a 3-star running back from Carroll. Okay. And his star is rising, by the way. This is his first year with a ton of carries. He was named the District 6A4 Newcomer of the Year. Again, 1,594 yards and 30 touchdowns, 8 games over 100 yards as a sophomore for a program like the Carroll Dragons is outstanding. Outstanding. If you know your Texas high school football, and you're around my age especially, you know Southlake Carroll. I mean, they had a national championship there in the 2000s. Chase Daniel was the quarterback there back then, as well as Greg McElroy won a national championship. The quarterback at the school 100 miles to the south of us is also a Carroll Dragon. He was just incredible. More than half their games, he was going over 100 yards. Also a great track runner as well. This is all from Will Turboff too. His older brother is an offensive lineman at Penn State. So definitely it runs in the family. That's for sure. He also had offers from schools like Texas State and Toledo at the group of 5 level, and then some Big 12 interest in Arizona State, as well as Wisconsin, who is typically a power up there in the Big 10. And he is the 25th ranked running back in the 247 Sports composite ranking. So a top 25 running back in this class has already committed to Baylor 2 years before he is set to graduate. Of course, there are the people that listen to this all the time and will inevitably say in the comments, whether it's on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever you can leave a comment on this video, on this episode, that you can't bank on him coming in here 2 years from now. Look, Khenon Hall has done an excellent job getting a lot of talent to look at Baylor, those who were already targeted by Baylor and those who were not. And he has gotten some real talent coming in his 2025 class. Can expect the same for 2026. The NIL gets better and better at Baylor. It's never going to be as big as it is at some of these other schools that you will inevitably mention. But it's doing pretty well in that sphere right now. And adding someone like Davis Penn is certainly going to to help for that recruiting class get off the ground here in 2026. And I do mention the Carroll thing. I love Texas high school football and its history. So that's obviously one that springs up the antennas for me. But if you look at the Khenon Hall effect here, TM, um, he has really targeted that Metroplex, and which is, you know, obvious coming from SMU. That's what he was doing before. And we've talked about it this last year or two, and looking ahead in the short term for SMU, they have done a terrific job recruiting their backyard, like better than maybe they ever have. And Khenon Hall was a part of that, and now certainly doing that at Baylor. But you look at some of the big offers, the big guys that they have offered, and you're looking at, Carroll and DeSoto and Duncanville, that some of the great powerhouses in this state that are really right up the road. DeSoto's like an hour away from Waco, right? And so to finally be able to tap into that, that's huge, I think, for the future of this program, and truly for the future of Dave Aranda's job. To link it all back to the head coach. I've gotten hoarse saying over the last year how much of a struggle it's been for Baylor to recruit in their backyard, in the powerhouses of Texas and in Central Texas as well. I mean, if you can recruit the Metroplex, that's great. You're going to win a lot of football games. But it's also hurt the last couple of years that they have not been able to get top talent here in Central Texas. When you look at guys like Torian York out of Temple, Micah Hudson, who was a 5-star guy at Lake Belton, which is right down the road, like had no interest in Baylor and didn't seem to be reciprocated on that front. You've Jaden Porter, notwithstanding the 4-star receiver from Lorena, but other than that, it's been real tough sledding, and it's been a lot of small time high school guys, and it's been really hit or miss, and it's been a tough road recruiting for Dave Aranda and Baylor. So to see a real emphasis on maybe the most chock full of talent region in high school football in all of America, that's a good place to target. That is a good place to target. And Davis Penn is just the first one for this 2026 class. Because if you look at some of the offers and the guys that they are interested in that class, they are not aiming low. I'll tell you that. And Davis Penn is one that, like, truly, you watch the tape, you see the numbers from last year. He is not going to graduate as a 3-star. He is only going to go up from here. And I think just really a brilliant start for the Bears in this 2026 recruiting class. Baylor football, of course, looking to hire prospects, bring them onto your team. When you're looking to hire people onto your team, you don't have a Khenon Hall, the only place you can look is LinkedIn.com and LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you got to check out LinkedIn. It's got the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I've gotten like all my jobs off LinkedIn. It's not just like any other job board, okay? They help you hire those professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't even actively searching for a new job, but are going to be perfect for you, okay? In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites, okay? Let me say that again. They don't visit anywhere else. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours through LinkedIn. That helps you hire professionals like a professional, because they know that you're wearing a ton of different hats. You don't have the time and the resources to put it all into hiring. That's why they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions, of course, do apply. No disrespect on football, but I think a lot of us are already really excited for this Baylor basketball season next year. I put out the call for some mailbag questions at the end of last episode, and one of, I think, the most intriguing one that I've gotten throughout this episode, that episode when I put it out, and the original mailbag, which I'm going to pull from as well, is this one about Baylor men's basketball going into this year. It asks, how worried are you about Josh O being the only true 5 on the basketball roster that has played meaningful time? Do you think the coaching staff will lean extremely hard on Omier as a backup 5? Or do you think Asamoah may be a viable option as another small 5? Okay. There's a couple of questions in here. There's also a bonus that I haven't read just yet. I want to address all of them. Personally, I'm no basketball coach or anything, but I was disappointed that Baylor did not add another big man through the portal. And I like the rest of this team enough that I'm not too worried about it. And obviously love Scott Drew enough that I'm not too worried about it. And I think this team is going to figure it out. But the way it's been constructed over the last few years, I thought they would add another center, really, not even just a power forward, like a center. Because right now, the only true center on the roster is Josh O. And I like Josh O. I thought he could have really stolen the starting center job last year. He didn't. Played a good platoon role still. And I don't mind him starting. That said, it's a guy who's been a platoon the last 2 years. Can he come in and give you 32 to 34 minutes as your center? Because that seems like a lot to ask. And so through that, yes, I'm disappointed. I saw some good centers go off the board in this newest wave of guys committing through the transfer portal. The big one for me, which I did a segment about a few weeks back, probably about a month ago now, was Ugonna Onyenso from Kentucky. Kind of, hadn't heard any momentum towards Baylor trying to get him in the door or trying to sign him. And so I was just thinking, man, I hope this guy doesn't go to the Big 12 because he's got Big 12 written all over him. He's got an incredible wingspan. I think it's 7'5", shot blocking monster in his limited minutes at Kentucky. And he is now with the Kansas State Wildcats. Didn't love that. Just did not love that. By the way, I think Jerome Tang has won the transfer portal big time. Baylor has gotten the right pieces for them at a really high level. Kansas State needed to flip a lot of their team, and I thought Tang has done a great job with that. With a couple of guys that I liked for Baylor, Onyenso, Doug McDaniel at guard. Obviously, Baylor did all right there, so not a big deal. And I thought, hey, let's take a flyer on Coleman Hawkins when he pulled his name out of the draft, and he ended up there as well, one of the top guys in the portal out of Illinois. So watch out for Kansas State this year, man. Trust me. I mean, this is a really, really talented league, but I like the moves they've made as well. So back to Baylor, though. I am worried about that. I am worried about that because they've said they've closed up shop. This is their roster, and the guys are on campus now. They've been on campus for a week. So like, I think they're right. I don't think you're adding someone right now for if you're Baylor. And if Josh O gets hurt, you're in a lot of trouble at that position, a lot of trouble. And I like the idea of a small ball lineup, and I think they will roll that out a lot. I think you'll see Norchad Omier playing the 5 out there. And I don't see that as a long-term fix, because if someone gets hurt, that's what it's going to need to be, a short-term, long-term. And I can't see that being successful for Baylor. That said, I've also talked about this on the podcast. I look at the way Houston builds their teams, the Big 12 champion, the standard bearer right now in this conference. They don't have a bunch of 7-footers. They don't. And neither does Iowa State, who was the conference tournament champions last year and will probably be a top 5, if not a top 10 team to start this year, along with Houston, along with Baylor, along with Kansas. Those two teams, who were two of the top defensive teams in the country last year, they didn't have a bunch of 7-footers on the bench. They had some long, athletic, really strong guys in their front court. A lot of 6'8", 6'9", but athletic and very physical. And I think Baylor is working its way towards that with a guy like Norchad Omier, who is at 6'7", but not a lot of 6'7" guys out there are averaging a double-double. He was at Miami. He's a walking double-double, averaging 11 boards a game. So to me, I see production I see grit. I see a good defender there. And whether he's 6'7" or 6'11", I don't know that that's going to make much of a difference unless he is your starting center, right? Um, and so I love the idea of Baylor going with a small ball lineup with him at the 5. The other part of that question was whether Asamoah could be your guy as a 5 in a pinch. I don't think so. As much as I really like Asamoah and talked about how I think he's an really underrated prospect in this class. He's not a center in the Big 12 right now. He's not. He is long and he is lanky, but there is a certain amount of strength you got to have to be a center in this conference. I think Omier has it at 6'7". I don't know that Asamoah has it yet at 6'9". He's 18 years old. Not a lot of them have that. Yves Missi was kind of on the border for that as an 18-year-old last year as a 7-footer. He did well enough. He was in Big 12 all defensive team. I just don't think Asamoah is there yet. So in some sort of small ball lineup where you're giving Ojamuna and Omier a rest, especially in the non-conference, I could see that for a couple of minutes, but I can't see any scenario where you're giving him 8 to 10 minutes a game as a center. And that's no knock on Asamoah. I just don't know that that's even his best fit. Here's a kid who could score from a couple of different levels, can score from the outside. I don't know that you're thinking he's coming in to be your center. I don't think so at all. So, but that's a question worth asking at this point, right? Because he is the second tallest guy on the roster right now. If I'm not mistaken, at 6'9", you have a bunch of 6'7s. You have one 6'10". You get Celestine at 6'7". You've got Omier obviously at 6'7". Yanis Ndonga, I don't think I said that right. He was redshirting last year at 6'7". That's it. That's it. So yeah, Asamoah is your second tallest guy on your roster. I don't see him playing a lot of minutes at center. And then the bonus hypothetical, which I also really liked. How would your outlook on this roster change if Yves Missi came back? I have thought about this question for like 48 straight hours. Okay. Because obviously I don't think the coaching staff expected him to come back this year. So it's not like they were way behind the 8 ball because they thought Yves Missi was coming back. I don't think. How would I feel? I would feel a little bit more secure about this team. But not crazy different because I think this team is going to be really good. Okay. So again, not a knock on Yves Missi because I already thought this team was going to be pretty good. I think he would have given you some insurance that would have absolutely helped me sleep better at night, picking them as a Final Four team. But I think it's important that Josh O gets this growth. And weirdly enough, I would have felt more excited if Jalen Bridges had come back. I just loved the way his game was developing at the end of last year. I thought he showed some real true leadership out there. And I just saw him being like an alpha towards the end of last season. I think that would have been great for this year's team. And it really would have given them, I think if Bridges had come back, this team would have looked a lot like the makeup of the 21 team. But then again, back to Yves Missi. If he comes back, I do love the insurance that it gives you at center. I just do. It's a ton of talent. It's a lot of defensive talent in that front court. I think Josh O is a good defender as well, but the proof was in the pudding for Yves Missi. He took that starting center role and he became a Big 12 all defensive guy. So would have liked it. Absolutely. Don't know that it would have made me jump from, Elite 8 team, Big 12 contender to national champions, but I definitely would have liked that. I would have been okay with that. That's for sure. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is also brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime is here. You can feel it when you step outside here in Waco, Texas. Let me tell you that. That means baseball, full swing. NBA Finals still going on. We got blessed with another game of that. That's great. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from who is going to be the Finals MVP, the Bill Russell Award winner, to who's going to hit one out of the park. And if it's Nick Castellanos, say your prayers, right? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Another question that we got, this one was from the last time I did a mailbag, and it didn't quite cut there, but I thought it was a really interesting one for this time around. This comes from superfan Scotty B. Appreciate you listening, Scotty. He put out there, who is Baylor's most overrated opponent on this year's football schedule? And I thought that's fascinating because this conference to me is such a toss-up, right? Like, there's so many question marks. I think it's going to be a busting quarterback conference. I think we could start to see it look like the old days of 7 or 8 years ago in the Big 12, the days that ESPN still thinks is the days of the Big 12. But it's tough for me to sit here and be like, here are the two teams that are going to be in Arlington. And so that makes this an even more interesting question than normal. Who is the most overrated team on Baylor's schedule? The first one that came to mind, and what I'm going to stick with as my #1 option, is the Week 4 matchup, Saturday, September 21st, when they go to Folsom Field to take on the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, this was the first one that I had that came to mind, but I did have a second to think about it because I'm like, well, nobody's picking Colorado to win the conference. You know, they're not going to be in the preseason rankings. But there is a lot of hype in some college football circles, some analysts that I really respect that are expecting Colorado to be a dark horse in this conference this year. And I just don't know where the evidence is coming from. I really don't. Shedeur looks like a very exciting playmaking quarterback. Don't get me wrong. And Travis Hunter is probably the best cornerback in all of college football. That hype is deserved. But we're talking about a team that went 4-8 last year. One win better than the Baylor Bears. And nobody's picking Baylor to do anything in this conference. So you look at a team that's about on par with you from what we're going off of last year. They brought a bunch of guys in through the portal, but they did the same thing last year. So they're in the same scenario, a bunch of guys getting to know each other right now, instead of guys who have played together for a few years. A coach who is still unproven at this level. It just doesn't, like, it's a stretch for me to say that's a bowl team. I just don't know anything about them. So yeah, then I say that, you know, they're not picked to win the conference, but there are some well-respected analysts out there that are looking at them as a 8-4, 9-3 kind of team. And I mean, who knows? You got a 9-3 team in the championship game there last year. So that was the first one that came to mind is Colorado. I don't see how people can be so comfortable to look at them as an 8-4, 9-3 team. I just can't. But they do certainly have some good pieces there. The other one that I am still not really sold on is Oklahoma State. That said, I think they have the best player in the conference. If it's not Travis Hunter, which it probably is on the defensive side of the ball, it's Ollie Gordon, who I think is going to get some legit Heisman hype this year. That kid is all kinds of exciting. But he was really exciting last year, and it just didn't cover up enough deficiencies that this team had, especially offensively. You're rolling with Alan Bowman to be a top 20 team, which they are in the preseason. They're looking to be a top 20 team. That's a big jump for me. That's a big jump for me. I know they lost some good talent last year, and I just can't put a lot of stock in the Alan Bowman thing. You know, I see someone like West Virginia with Garrett Green, who I really liked last year at quarterback, and I thought was a hot team last year at 8-4, whereas Oklahoma State was 9-3. I like West Virginia's prospects a lot more this year than I like Oklahoma State's, and it starts with that quarterback position. Now, I could be wrong; they don't have that difficult a schedule, but yeah, they're up there as one of the top odds to win this conference. I don't see it. I like Iowa State probably a little bit better than I like Oklahoma State specifically. There we go, with their defense. And then the other ones on that I'm looking at on the conference are just question marks, not necessarily overhyped. Like, I don't think TCU is garnering legitimate traction to win the Big 12 either. But I just don't know what you're getting out of that team with Josh Hoover. I don't know. Tech the same way. If Baron Morton is healthy, which is a big question mark, that's a dark horse team for me too. And Utah is my pick to win the conference. That said, their schedule is easy enough that if they're in a college football playoff scenario, they could get humbled in the college football playoff after playing a Big 12 schedule this year for whatever, 3 straight months. So maybe that's the one we'll look back at the end of the season as being the overrated one. But right now, I've got to have Colorado at the top and Oklahoma State number 2. By the way, that first game, as I mentioned earlier, Colorado is week 4 on the road in Boulder. The Bears will host Oklahoma State on October 26th, which is homecoming. I say they're the two most overrated to me. Overhyped teams on the schedule. I can't really sit here and pick Baylor to win either one of those games on June 17th of 2024. So those are the 2 most hyped for me. I would love to hear who the most overhyped ones are for you. Did I get this wrong? Am I missing something? Drop that down in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious about that. Who you guys think is the most overhyped team on there? Do you think that Baylor can ride small ball all the way to a national championship? I'd love to hear that too. Drop that down in the comments. Or if you're concerned, I'd like to hear that as well. Drop that down. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell. We're going to drop those videos to you on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Again, 3 days a week throughout the summer here. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOnBaylor. And if you have any questions for mailbags down the future, be sure to drop that down in the comments here. Like I said, I'll check that for next week, or obviously tweet that out to us as well. Be more than happy to give you some insight on that if we can. Thank you again for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll see you later on this week and Locked On Baylor.